Hello Indie Game fan, picking just one Metroidvania per year is going to be tough, but let's try anyway, where 2013 was a very different time, but my pick is Velda's Story Abyssal City. This is a combat-focused title that leans more towards the Symphony of the Night end of things, where you fight your way through the ruins of a once holy city that has now become overrun with all sorts of enemies and are caught in between heaven and hell, with neither side being the good guys here. Most interestingly, there are 4 playable characters to choose from which to stick with for the entire game, so essentially you could play through the game 4 times, with each character being unique. However, there's a little bit of an asterisk here, since the exploration part of the search action or Metroidvania game is not as strong, with the focus once again being on the combat, but that in particular is well done and is still worth a look 10 years later. 2014 saw the release of the mini Metroidvania Zeo Drifter, as well as the not-so-indie Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, but I want to showcase Guacamelee Super Turbo Championship Edition, an enhanced re-release of Guacamelee Gold Edition, which was a 2013 release, where the earlier edition is one of the first indie Metroidvanias that I played and got me started down this path of creating this YouTube channel. The Mexican luchador theme title is excellent, featuring a classic Save the Princess type story, where the best parts of this game is the dimension switching with both a living and dead world versions in all levels, which, combined with the wrestling moves of our hero, the Easter eggs and references, as well as the generally light-hearted vibe, makes this a must-play. Oof! 2015 was a good year for Metroidvanias with some must-play classics, but my pick has to be Axiom Verge, one that, on the surface, looks to be a pretty faithful tribute to Metroid but hides some secrets of its own. It's a sci-fi entry where a laboratory accident sends our character into an alien world, now having to pick up the nearest weapon and to start exploring. Naturally, in Metroidvania style, the exploration here is critical, where you will get abilities to explore to access new parts of the map, but refreshingly comes in the form of drones and grappling hooks rather than somehow gaining the ability to double jump for whatever reason. There's a nice variety of weapons with interesting abilities, which then brings us to the visuals, which absolutely nails the pixel art of that era and is truly a special game. There were a couple of interesting Metroidvanias in 2016, but the one that stood out to me is Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight, the 4th entry in the Momodora series that introduced a whole bunch of people to this franchise. Granted, Momodora 1 and 3 were more linear, with the 2nd entry first experimenting with the Metroidvania concept, but this title is a refinement of those games and is excellent. One of the more unique things about this game is that our heroine wields a maple leaf as a weapon, which is unique, as she fights her way through the world to seek an audience with the Queen in order to get her help. There's an almost Souls-like nature to this game, from the grim, dark fantasy world, monstrous enemies, and even back and forth combat. The boss fights here are a highlight, especially the ones against humanoid enemies, which, as you might know from anime, are the killers to watch for in a world of monstrous creatures, where the RPG and item systems added on makes it fantastic. Come on now, I don't think this will be a controversial opinion, but Hollow Knight is the pick for 2017 since it is widely regarded to be the best indie game ever, let alone indie Metroidvania, where it is truly a masterpiece in so many ways. It is set in the bug kingdom that has fallen into ruin, where our character has to delve into to explore, with the goal of finding out what happened and to perhaps cleanse the corruption. It did take many cues from Dark Souls in the overall dark fantasy vibe, intense combat without being stamina based, and the very obscure lore and backstory, which of course has led to popular lore videos on YouTube, but to have the characters and enemies as variants of bugs is quite unique. The developers also released 4 major content updates all for free, with the final Godmaster update adding next level challenges, where the only criticism that I see and do share is that it has a relatively slow start up until Green Path, but push through and you will discover a fantastic game. 2018 saw the release of Guacamelee 2, which you might think would make this list, but I have to give a mention to one of my favourite underrated titles in Yoku's Island Express, a self-described pinballvania that can only exist in the world of indie games. Yes, indeed, this is not a typical Metroidvania in that there isn't traditional combat and exploration, where our dung beetle postman protagonist cannot even jump. But the developers have made and integrated pinball tables into the design of the world itself. There are Metroidvania-style ability unlocks, as well as the all-important shortcuts and a clever fast travel system, where the ingenuity of mixing together these genres is just mwah, and it's one of the reasons why I love and continue to showcase awesome indie games. Okay, I see 2019 being possibly the most controversial selection since we were absolutely spoiled with so many fantastic releases, but I have to go old school with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night.
What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets. But enough talk. How about you?
A title that comes to us from legendary Japanese game developer Koji Igarashi, widely thought of as the father of Castlevania, striking out on his own away from Konami to make, well, pretty much the same game with a different name. This had a tremendously successful Kickstarter campaign, but it faced its share of issues, and perhaps has no right of being as good as it is, where the visuals in an early version was widely criticized, but the developer did take their feedback into account. This is very much like Symphony of the Night, where the leveling and skill progression and unlocks is definitely on that end of things as compared to Metroid, where you can grind to become overpowered if you want to, with plenty of unlocks, side quests, customization options and weird twists and turns that you might not see coming, including a crossover with Journey for some reason, making it a must-play. On a technical and artistic level, the title that everyone will be pointing to is Ori and the Will of the Wisps, but the Microsoft Association and allegations of a toxic work environment means that I cannot in good conscience recommend this title, but luckily for us, the weird and wonderful world of indie games exists, with Monster Sanctuary being a must-play. This is yet another atypical Metroidvania without the classic combat, instead featuring turn-based Pokemon-style combat instead, where the special abilities of the monsters allow you to access new areas. It does have quite a bit of content with the sheer number of creatures, their skill trees and specializations, free DLC, endgame content and so much more, not to mention the excellent pixel art, where again, the genius of blending together these genres is what you would find in indie games. I'll break my own rules here since technically Ender Lilies Crisis of the Nights is not an indie game, coming to us from a sizable Japanese developer, but I suppose it might be far enough out of the mainstream to warrant a mention, where this despondent and hauntingly beautiful title is worth a play. Thematically, this is most similar to Momodora Reverie Under the Moonlight mentioned earlier, where you play as a priestess in the Cursed Land, where a rain known as the Blight corrupts all that it touches, turning both humans and creatures into horrific monsters. Our main character cannot directly attack herself, instead relying on spirits to do the dirty work, where defeating bosses in combat would add them to your repertoire, being, strangely enough, a throwback of sorts to Mega Man. The soundtrack is beautiful and the action fantastic, and as a result, stood out in 2021. Honestly, 2022 was not a great vintage for Metroidvanias, but we did have some wonderful smaller titles, but I'm going to opt for what feels fresh, ironically, in the throwback title Infernax. Instead of being Hollow Knight inspired like many of these modern games are, Infernax is a classic Vania title, having more in common with Simon's Quest than Symphony of the Night, where it's a challenging title with great art and even choices to make and multiple endings, being a palate cleanser, since 2023 sure looks like the year of the Metroidvania. Fingers crossed that Silksong comes out, where you'll find 50 upcoming titles in this video.